Hello, advanced English learners. Welcome back. We are so excited for this episode. I am joined by the one and only Greg. And today we thought we would talk about something that I think is on a lot of people's minds. But before we jump in, I just want to remind you that, we're doing these for you to help you improve your listening comprehension, to help you hear what connected speech sounds like in action, to help you with your pronunciation, your intonation, your prosody, so communication in general. And then also, giving you an opportunity to learn new vocabulary, new expressions, and learn a little bit about Americans' perspective on certain things going on in the world. So that being said, do you want to know today's topic, Greg?
I would love to know today's topic.
So I thought we could talk today about the metaverse.
Metaverse. Big topic.
Yep. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so the metaverse. This is something that I think is on a lot of people's minds as it is on the horizon. We started to hear a lot about it more recently in the news, and I think people are starting to realize that this is probably the direction that we are headed in.
Yeah, well, it is certainly a direction. Obviously, I think before we dive into the specifics, it's probably good to define what the metaverse is.
I think that's a great idea. It's a great starting point.
Yeah.
So what is it? It was actually a term coined by the author of this book called Snow Crash back, several years now. Maybe I want to say the 70s or 80s.
Yeah. Back in this sort of the origin of like the cypherpunk era.
Yeah, so from this sci-fi novel, and we've heard it also more recently in the book turned film Ready Player One.
Mm-hmm. A Steven Spielberg film.
Great film, by the way. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend if you're into futuristic sci-fi as we are.
And gaming.
So, okay, we still didn't define it. So it is I feel like you as someone who games can help shed light on the definition, but my understanding is that it is a place, a virtual realm in which we have avatars that are representations of us in the metaverse. And there is not just one metaverse yet. There might be in the future, but just like there's not one search engine, we have multiple search engines, Yahoo, Google, Brave, Mozilla, all these different search engines. We're probably going to start out with multiple different metaverses. So it's a virtual realm in which we can interact with each other, we can have entertainment, we can learn things, we can live our virtual life, which is parallel to our physical life.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good description of the metaverse. You also, I really like your comparison to a search engine. Why? Because when search engines first started, there were many search engines, right? You had Yahoo, Google, Alta Vista. Was it like Dogpile? You remember that?
I don't know that one.
Yeah. There were a bunch. Ask Jeeves.
Ask Jeeves. I do remember Ask
We're
Jeeves.
dating ourselves here. These were all sort of like back in the 90s, early 2000s. And AOL, yeah, that was
America Online, that was a big one.
Exactly. So,
MSN Messenger.
Yeah, MSN had their own search. So all of these existed at one time. It was kind of what you call a Cambrian Explosion, right? Like that's the Cambrian Explosion in prehistoric times is when a lot of different dinosaur species came into being. So it was a Cambrian explosion of search engines, and then over time, the best performing search engines outcompeted in a Darwinian process. They outcompeted the other ones.
So survival of the fittest. What was the best? What was the strongest? Who survived?
Exactly. So that's called a Darwinian process, right? Darwin came up with this idea of evolution, where the fittest survive. And that happened in the search engine game. And of course, now we all know the largest search engine, which is now a verb, called Google. Right? And so what did Google do best? It indexed all the content of the internet in a way that was much more efficient than other search engines. And the reason I bring this up is Google has the what's called Metcalfe's law. It benefits from Metcalfe's law, right? These network effects. And it says that the bigger the network gets, the more valuable that network becomes to its participants. And that same law will apply to the metaverse, right? And so this metaverse...
So the bigger the metaverse, the better it is, the more
that
value.
people use a metaverse, the more used it becomes, the more value it provides, and therefore the more people are drawn to it.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with Facebook, right? For a long time, Facebook was basically the only social network out there.
Yeah.
Because that's where everyone got their information from their friends, right? Because that's where all their friends were. And so you go where your friends are going. Over time, though, interestingly, other social media companies have been able to enter and compete.
Yes.
Right? So that's an example where even though there was one dominant player, new players came and competed with them.
Right, exactly.
And so these are the same dynamics we're probably going to see play out in the metaverse.
Yeah.
And of course, you're probably familiar with one of the big contenders for the metaverse, which is, we mentioned it already, Facebook, right?
Newly called Meta, and you wonder why, right? Meta. So we actually, in English, we don't say meta, but it's spelled M-E-T-A, right? But we say meta, right? Have the D sound
Sounds
in
like
there.
A D, yeah.
Meta.
Right, so they've labeled themselves Meta, and this is their whole transition strategy, right? They're going to pivot to becoming a metaverse. And that kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, because it's already a social network. There are a lot of people on it. There's hundreds of millions of people on there.
Billions
at this point.
Yeah.
I remember when it first started out as a college-only social network. So you could only enter if you had a .edu, so a .education email address, which you would get when you entered university here in the US. And they first opened it to only a select few universities, and then it became, it had the snowball
it started
effect.
Harvard only.
Harvard only. And it was actually based, just a little side tangent here because it kind of shows the evolution of how these things work. The Facebook was an actual tangible physical book of people's faces. And so it was a way to get to know people. This is, again, it's almost prehistoric. I actually still have the one that we had in college.
Our college Facebook?
First year. Yeah, it's somewhere like
so funny
in the attic. But it's so funny because it started out like that. So who knows? A physical book with people's faces. So that being said, you can imagine how, we have all these ideas about the metaverse, and who knows how that's really going to start out. And then looking back, it's going to be like, oh, really? It was that?
So that's a really important concept in technology. It's called skeuomorphic design. Skeuomorphic design. And what it refers to is when a new medium of technology comes out, in this case, a digital social network.
Yeah.
The initial instinct is for people to replicate what existed in the previous paradigm, right? And so the previous paradigm was books, right?
Books,
that you could, and you also had the social register, right? That was a book, right? Where you could look up people's names and phone numbers and phone books, right?
Yes.
So the skeuomorphic adaptation in a digital context would actually be called Facebook.
Yeah.
Because it's like a book. And
they just dropped the.
Yeah. And it had a picture of someone and a little information about them. So it was very similar to the actual book. And over time, that turned into what it is now, which is like a news feed. It's a sharing content. It's a place for people to come together, form groups, right?
Sell things. It's a marketplace.
A bajillion different things.
So many things.
Those are all things people could have never anticipated at the start.
Right.
And we can expect something very similar in the metaverse, right? Right now, what you described is what we're all sort of envisioning. It's this incredible digital world where we can do everything. We can play games, we can learn, we can interact.
We can go shopping. I was reading somewhere that people, even experts, are contending, they're anticipating, they're surmising and guessing that people can even get married in the metaverse.
Oh, sure. I mean, that already happens in games like World of Warcraft.
How does that work?
People meet each other online. They're playing the game together. And some of these games are hard, right? And so people bond over adversity.
Yeah, of course.
And so they do something fun together, and over enough time, they build a real relationship.
Yeah.
And that world means something to them. And so conducting the ceremony in that world in which they form that relationship seems actually quite reasonable.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a more recent film, Yes, Guy.
Yes, Guy.
Guy. I think it's on Netflix if you're interested again in seeing sort of, this is not a dystopian reality, but it's just a reflection of things that happen in the metaverse stay in the metaverse, but not always. And it just kind of reminds me of how, relationships can form in this not off-world, because we're not talking about going to Mars or Venus, but in this online versus offline reality, and right, how these two realities, when they collide, are they what they seem to be?
It can be very confusing.
It can be so confusing.
Yeah, it can be very confusing. And that's, I think, a real concern that people have, which is if these virtual worlds, these metaverses become so engaging, will people even do anything in the physical world? And we have yet to see and how that blend works. And there's also another part of it, which is maybe the metaverse isn't quite as enveloping as we think, at least in that traditional sense where you put on a headset and disappear.
So maybe enveloping is when you're completely consumed by it.
Think like an envelope.
An envelope, exactly. So go ahead.
So maybe instead what happens is you're wearing contacts,
interesting.
Right? And you get a heads-up display. So you see the real world, but on top of that is the metaverse that's overlaid on top of it, right? So I'm sitting here in this room and I'm looking at the camera here, and maybe I can see you standing next to the camera, but you're not actually there. It's just the representation of you on my contact lens.
Really interesting.
Right? And I'll see some information above it about the weather or like maybe the script that I'm speaking, right? So there's many different ways that you can overlay digital worlds onto our actual reality. And that's what you
more
call
of like an augmented reality.
AR, augmented reality. And so maybe the metaverse is actually, because what we found so far with VR is that people get tired of it after not too much time, right? After an hour or so, they're kind of like, I need to get back to the real world. This is too disorienting. Right?
Yeah, and not to mention, like I remember doing the skiing in the virtual world. With was it HoloLens that we were doing?
Yeah.
I found it really jarring, and I found like it made me dizzy immediately. So even though I like to ski in the real world, and I'll do it almost every year, like I could not really do it properly in the virtual reality, and I was like, Greg, get me out of here.
Totally. And that might just be growing pains. Maybe as the technology improves, it becomes more comfortable and we can spend more time. But I would not be surprised if we find that we prefer to blend virtual reality and physical reality rather than completely replace physical with the virtual.
I think I would make that guess as well, particularly since I think transitioning into AR first is a lot easier than going from this world, this realm, straight into the virtual realm.
Yes.
We need to still feel a semblance of the physicality of our...
Yeah, we like to be grounded.
Of our space, I think. As humans, generally speaking. You might have another opinion, and I welcome that, and we would love to hear what your thoughts are. I want to talk a little bit about applications of the metaverse. I can think of one that I'm really excited about. Do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, I'd love to hear.
So I think the education component of this, learning, right? So learning by doing. Suddenly, let's say you're learning French. Suddenly you're in France and you're ordering a baguette and you're ordering coffee and you're ordering whatever from a cafe in a cool district in Paris, right? So suddenly you're in this space and you're practicing your language skills, or maybe you're learning a complex coding concept and you're, surrounded by coding experts and with coders, and, you're leveling up that way. I think it's super cool.
Yeah, I think learning is a terrific example of the metaverse, because you can bring together people from all around the world who might never have a chance to physically meet. You can bring them together in this virtual space. Yeah. They can represent themselves however they like. And they can even be speaking different languages, right?
True.
And they're sort of translated. You're not going to get this. It's not the same thing as if they were speaking, the language natively.
Sure.
But you can at least communicate, without much interruption.
Yeah.
Right? Without too much friction, because everything's sort of enabled digitally. So,
so there'll be like real-time translation, maybe.
Yeah, to some extent, right? The point is, at the very least, they can sort of come together and share experiences. And a lot of things, you can have a shared experience without even speaking at all.
It's true,
right?
Yeah, because there's so much that gets conveyed through the nonverbal communication, the smiles, the expressions, the body language, right? We can sense someone who is hostile towards us and someone who's friendly toward us without them even opening their mouth to speak, right?
I mean, think about Charlie Chaplin, right? People love Charlie Chaplin, and
right.
there
So
wasn't even any sound.
silent films, hilarious.
The other thing that's, I think, really important to consider, regardless of the application of it, is who owns it.
Interesting. Like what company owns it?
Yeah, right? Yeah. And this comes up in Ready Player One, which is who's the master of the universe?
That's the underlying premise. That's the underlying sort of idea of the movie.
And it's kind of scary. We talked about Facebook potentially being a contender.
Yeah.
I personally don't want Mark Zuckerberg to own the metaverse, right?
Yeah,
I don't really want to live in his world. I want to live in my own world. I want to define my own rules. Or I want the rules to be defined by everyone sort of collectively, right?
That's so funny we said the same word. We're not this is not scripted, by the way.
Yeah, it isn't.
Like, there is no script.
But so that's why I also personally believe if we do the metaverse, I'm a huge proponent of doing it in a decentralized way. Right? I want a metaverse where the participants get to choose the rules, where it comes together and provides people a lot of freedom as to how they interact, what they bring into it, what they do with it.
Yeah.
And so from my perspective, a decentralized metaverse, which requires decentralized technology, right? That's why I think the blockchain, one of the most important applications of the blockchain in the future is to power this decentralized world, right? When you run things on a credibly neutral network, right, where no one controls it or everyone controls it, you don't have to worry about any one person saying, oh, you can't do this or you have to do this.
Right. Just being dictated or censored.
Right.
Or
no one can tell you what to
told what to do.
Because, it's when you have a million people all weighing in, everyone's going to have a different perspective.
Of course.
So the only common ground you can find is let everyone do what they want. Now, this can be chaotic.
Well, it could be anarchy, right?
It could be anarchy.
Meaning ruleless, lawless.
Lawless.
So we see that also in dystopian movies. What was it that we were watching?
Mad Max?
Could be. I've actually never seen Mad Max.
Okay.
But you see it, these are common tropes, right? Common themes that we see where if everyone just wants to do it, whatever, there's just going to be pure chaos.
Right. So you obviously don't want that.
No.
But what's beautiful with a sort of decentralized, neutral foundation is on top of that, you can build whatever you want. So Facebook can, on top of that, build a safe space for their metaverse or their section of the metaverse. Disney can build a wonderful version of their metaverse.
Right.
But they're building on top of a neutral foundation where everyone can sort of create their own version of what they think the metaverse should be, or sort of their corner of the metaverse. And that way everyone can choose what networks to participate in and which parts to stay away from, right? It's up to them.
Absolutely. I think, you still have that human agency, meaning you have that choice to make as humans, like what you want to do, or how do you want to participate, how do you want to engage in the metaverse.
Totally.
So it's something to think about. There's still so many questions, honestly.
And what you want to teach, going back to your example, like maybe in some countries it's not acceptable to teach certain subjects. In other countries it is acceptable, right? So having a place where you can teach what you want to teach without feeling beholden to, what your government says, that could be interesting too.
Right. So there's just so many questions. I think over time, some people are saying as soon as 2030, we're all going to somehow be involved in the metaverse. So it'll be interesting to see if that plays out that way. It could be sooner, could be later. What are your thoughts? Do you think we're going to be entering the metaverse sooner or later?
And what's it going to look like?
Yeah, exactly. What should it look like?
Yeah, what do you want it to look like?
So there's a lot to think about here. We're happy to do a part 2 if that's something that you're interested in. And again, it would be really cool to hear your perspectives on what you're thinking about the future of the metaverse and where that's going to take us as the human race, so to speak. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you really enjoy the podcast and the channel, feel free to give it some love, show it some love, meaning give it a like, give it a comment, give it a Q&A, give a review, leave a review if that's something that you feel adamant about, meaning you feel strongly about in a good way, and share it. That really makes a difference because we are able to get the podcast and the content to as many people as we can. And our goal is to empower you as a communicator to communicate much better in your social life, in your personal life, your professional life. So these are important resources to have. and hopefully you're enjoying it as well, because we definitely are. And I have some exciting news that I'm going to be sharing very, very soon. So make sure to get that news to be, in the mix of what's going on here at Advanced English.
Informed.
To be informed. Thank you, Greg. That's the word I was looking for. You want to make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter. So you can easily do that. It's a free newsletter. You just go to our website, advancedenglish.co, and there's a little pop-up and you can just sign up. You can also scroll to the bottom and you'll see mailing list. So just join that. It's 100% free and you get lessons from us every week, as well as some upcoming very exciting news that Greg and I are super excited to let you know about. So that'll be cool. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. Bye, everyone.